A successful businessman went to an upscale restaurant dressed as a beggar. When he arrived at the table, the waiters refused to serve him and began to ask him to leave. In the opulent city of New York, where skyscrapers rose like monuments to power and wealth, lived Alex Morgan, a man whose life seemed straight out of a modern fairy tale. At 45, Alex had it all: incalculable fortune, successful businesses spread across the world, and an impeccable reputation as the country's most influential entrepreneur. However, behind this facade of success and glamour, Alex hid a secret that tormented him day and night. 20 years ago, when he was just an ambitious young man newly arrived in the big city, he had been rescued from poverty by a mysterious benefactor. This man, whose face he never saw, had given him the necessary boost to start his empire. The only condition he imposed was that when Alex achieved success, he must help others as he had been helped. 2 decades later, Alex had fulfilled his promise in spades. He donated millions to charitable organizations and had created a foundation to help young entrepreneurs. But he felt something was missing, that he wasn't truly honoring the spirit of that promise made so many years ago. It was then that he decided to undertake a social experiment that would change his life forever. He set out to experience firsthand what it was like to be treated when you had nothing, when appearance dictated a person's worth. And so one Friday night, Alex Morgan, dressed in old worn clothes, messed up his graying hair and headed to the most exclusive restaurant in the city, the Golden Gate. The Golden Gate wasn't just any restaurant, it was the epitome of luxury and exclusivity, a place where the rich and powerful gathered to close million-dollar deals and flaunt their status. The owner, Ethan Wilson, was known for his critical eye for business and his ability to make connections among New York's elite. What Alex didn't know was that night, his social experiment would become the catalyst for a series of events that would shake the foundations of his life and those around him. As he entered the Golden Gate, Alex immediately felt the looks of contempt and disgust from the diners. The maitre d', a tall thin man named Richard, intercepted him before he could take another step. "Sir, I'm afraid you're in the wrong place," Richard said in a cold, cutting voice. "This establishment has a strict dress code policy. I suggest you find a place more suitable to your situation." Alex, determined to carry his experiment to the end, insisted. "I have a reservation," he lied confidently. "Under the name Morgan." Richard checked his list with disdain, knowing he wouldn't find such a reservation. "I'm sorry, sir, but I don't see any reservation under that name. I kindly ask you to leave before we are forced to take more drastic measures." It was at that moment that a familiar voice resonated in the restaurant's lobby. "What's going on here, Richard?" Ethan Wilson, the owner of the Golden Gate and unbeknownst to him, one of Alex's best friends in the business world, approached with curiosity. Alex felt a knot in his stomach. He hadn't counted on encountering Ethan that night, and for a moment considered abandoning his charade. But something inside him pushed him to continue. "This gentleman insists he has a reservation, sir," Richard explained with disdain. "I've explained to him that there's clearly been a mistake and that he must leave." Ethan looked at Alex with a mixture of curiosity and compassion. There was something in the eyes of this disheveled man that seemed strangely familiar, but he couldn't place it. "What's your name, sir?" Ethan asked in a kinder voice than his employees. "Alex," the disguised businessman replied, holding his breath. Ethan frowned as if trying to remember something important. "Alex, do we know each other from somewhere?" Before Alex could respond, Richard intervened. "Mr. Wilson, with all due respect, we can't allow this type of individual to frequent our establishment. It will ruin the reputation we've worked so hard to build." Richard's words ignited something in Ethan. He turned to his employee with a severe look. "Richard, who do you think you are to judge a person's worth based on their appearance? This man is a potential customer, and he deserves the same respect as anyone else who crosses those doors." The tension in the atmosphere was palpable. The other diners watched the scene with a mixture of curiosity and disgust. Alex, for his part, felt increasingly uncomfortable with the situation he had created. Ethan turned to Alex with a kind smile. "Please, sir, allow me to invite you to dinner tonight as my special guest. I'd like to make up for the treatment you've received." Alex, moved by his friend's gesture, who clearly hadn't recognized him, nodded silently. As Ethan personally guided him to one of the best tables in the restaurant, Alex couldn't help but feel a mixture of pride in his friend and shame for having doubted him. What neither of them knew was that this night would mark the beginning of a series of events that would test their friendship, their principles, and everything they thought they knew about themselves and the world around them. As Alex sat at the luxurious table, feeling the disapproving gaze of the other diners, he couldn't imagine that his little experiment was about to unleash a storm that would shake the foundations of New York's high society and change the course of many lives forever. Ethan sat across from Alex, intrigued by this mysterious man who had caused such a stir in his restaurant. "Tell me, Alex, what brings you to the Golden Gate tonight?" he asked with genuine curiosity. Alex, still playing his role, responded with a tired voice. "I wanted to see how the other half lives, I guess. See if money really makes a difference in how you're treated." Ethan nodded thoughtfully, "And I'm afraid you found that unfortunately it often does. But let me tell you something, Alex. I've known many rich men in my life, and I can assure you that money doesn't always equate to wealth of spirit." As they talked, a young waitress named Sarah approached the table. Unlike Richard, she looked at Alex with kindness and compassion. "Good evening, gentlemen. Can I offer you something to drink?" she asked with a warm smile. Ethan ordered a bottle of his best wine, insisting that Alex deserved to be treated like a king that night. Sarah nodded and withdrew, but not before casting a final curious glance at Alex. While they waited for the wine, Ethan began to talk about his life, his businesses, and his philosophy. Alex listened attentively, surprised to discover facets of his friend that he had never known before. "You know, Alex," Ethan said with a sigh, "sometimes I wonder if all this is worth it. The money, the prestige, does it really make us happy?" Alex, momentarily forgetting his role, replied, "I think happiness isn't in what we have, but in what we do with it." Ethan looked at him in surprise. "Those are wise words for someone who, well, forgive my boldness, but doesn't seem to have had much luck in life." Alex realized his mistake and quickly tried to correct it. "I've had time to think about these things. When you have nothing, you value the little you have." The conversation was interrupted by Sarah's return with the wine. As she served, Alex noticed that the young woman had a small bruise on her wrist, barely visible under the sleeve of her uniform. When their eyes met, Sarah quickly lowered her gaze as if afraid he had seen too much. Ethan, oblivious to this exchange, raised his glass. To second chances and unexpected lessons, he toasted. As they drank, Alex couldn't stop thinking about Sarah and what he had seen. Was she in trouble? Was there something more behind her kind smile? The night progressed and the restaurant began to empty. Ethan, increasingly intrigued by his mysterious guest, shared stories of his past, of how he had built his empire from scratch. "There was a time," Ethan confessed, "when I too was on the brink of the abyss, but I was lucky enough to find someone who believed in me, who gave me a chance when no one else would." Alex felt a lump in his throat. Could it be that? "It was many years ago," Ethan continued, his gaze lost in his memories. "I was young, ambitious, but completely broke. One day, a man approached me in Central Park. I never saw his face clearly, but he offered me the capital to start my first business. The only thing he asked in return was that, when I succeeded, I should help others as he had helped me." Alex felt the world stop around him. It was his story, the same promise he had made 2 decades ago. Could it be that Ethan and he shared the same mysterious benefactor? Before he could process this revelation, a sharp scream broke the calm atmosphere of the restaurant. Ethan and Alex jumped to their feet, only to see Sarah running towards the kitchen, pursued by a burly man who was shouting furiously, "Sarah!" Ethan exclaimed, running towards the scene. Alex, completely forgetting his disguise, followed without hesitation. "There's nothing personal about abuse," he said, in a voice that resonated with authority, completely forgetting his role as a beggar. Everyone in the kitchen turned to look at him, surprised by the change in his demeanor. Ethan, in particular, looked at him with narrowed eyes, as if suddenly something clicked in his mind. "Alex?" Ethan asked, realization dawning on his face. "Alex Morgan?" The silence that followed was deafening. Alex, knowing his charade had come to an end, nodded slowly. "Yes, Ethan, it's me." The revelation fell like a bomb in the kitchen. Jack, taking advantage of the confusion, tried to sneak away, but Alex stopped him with a look that could have frozen hell. You're not going anywhere, Alex said coldly. We have a lot to talk about regarding how you treat your coworkers. Ethan, still stunned by the revelation, looked at his friend with a mixture of amazement and confusion. Alex, what? Why? But before Alex could explain, Sarah let out a choked sob. Everyone turned to her, suddenly remembering the gravity of the situation that had triggered this revelation. I didn't want to cause trouble, Sarah mumbled through tears. But I couldn't take it anymore. Jack, he's been abusing me for months. He threatened to have me fired if I spoke up. Sarah's confession unleashed a storm of emotions in the kitchen. Ethan, recovering from his initial shock, turned to Jack with a look that could have melted steel. You're fired, he said in a voice that admitted no argument. And if I ever see you near Sarah or any of my employees again, I'll make sure you never work in this city again. Jack, seeing that his game was up, tried one last desperate move. You can't do this to me. I have information that could ruin this place. Alex stepped forward, his presence imposing despite his ragged clothes. Are you sure you want to play that game, Jack? Because I assure you, you have no idea who you're messing with. The cook, finally realizing the gravity of his situation, visibly paled. Without another word, he turned and ran out of the kitchen. With the immediate threat neutralized, everyone could breathe a little easier. Sarah, still shaking, was comforted by her coworkers. Ethan, for his part, couldn't stop looking at Alex as if he were seeing a stranger. Alex, he finally said, I think you have a lot of explaining to do. Alex nodded, knowing the moment of truth had arrived. You're right, old friend. And I think this story is something everyone needs to hear. As the group prepared to listen to Alex's explanation, no one could imagine how this extraordinary night would change their lives forever. The truth was about to come to light, and with it, long-held secrets and unsuspected connections that would shake the foundations of their worlds. Copy, retry and continue. Where you left off, edit. Ethan led everyone to a private room in the restaurant, away from prying ears. Alex, Sarah, and a small group of employees who had witnessed the incident sat around a large mahogany table. The tension in the air was palpable. All right, Alex, Ethan began, his voice mixing curiosity and reproach. Start from the beginning. Alex took a deep breath and began his tale. He told them about his humble origins, his arrival in New York City with dreams, but not a penny to his name, and the mysterious benefactor who changed his life. As he spoke, he saw Ethan's eyes widening more and more, recognizing elements of his own story in his friend's narrative. But that doesn't explain why you're here tonight dressed like this, Ethan interrupted when Alex paused. You're right, Alex admitted. You see, despite all my success, I felt something was missing, that I wasn't truly honoring the promise I made all those years ago. So I decided to experience what it was like to be treated when you have nothing, when appearance dictates a person's worth. An uncomfortable silence fell over the room. The employees present shifted in their seats, aware of how they had initially treated Alex. I never intended to cause trouble or embarrass anyone, Alex continued. I just wanted to understand firsthand the struggles faced by those less fortunate. Ethan ran a hand over his face, processing all the information. Alex, my friend, your heart was in the right place, but don't you think there were better ways to achieve that? Before Alex could respond, Sarah spoke up for the first time since they entered the room. Excuse me, but I think what Mr. Morgan did was brave. Everyone turned to look at her surprised. If he hadn't been here tonight, who knows what would have happened with me and Jack? Sarah's words seemed to break the ice. Gradually, other employees began to share their own experiences, talking about the difficulties they faced in their daily lives, how sometimes they felt invisible or less valued because of their position. Alex and Ethan listened attentively, their faces reflecting a mixture of surprise and shame. How had they been so blind to the struggles of the people who surrounded them every day? I think we've all learned a valuable lesson tonight, Ethan finally said, myself included. I've been so focused on the success of the restaurant that I forgot the most important thing, the people who make it possible. Alex nodded, feeling that his experiment had achieved much more than he ever imagined. Ethan, I think it's time we make some changes, not just at the Golden Gate but in all our businesses. The two friends looked at each other, a silent understanding passing between them. Then Ethan turned to his employees. Starting tomorrow, we're going to implement some changes, better wages, benefits, and a program to help those who want to advance in their careers. The employees looked at each other, surprised and excited. Sarah, with tears in her eyes, was the first to speak. "Thank you, Mr. Wilson. This means a lot to all of us." Alex smiled, feeling that he was finally truly fulfilling the promise he made so many years ago. But as he observed the hopeful faces around him, he couldn't help but think about the mysterious benefactor who had changed his life and Ethan's. Who was he? And were there more people like them, helped by this anonymous angel? When the meeting ended and the employees left, Ethan and Alex remained alone in the room. Ethan began, "This whole situation has made me think. Do you believe our mysterious benefactor planned this? That he helped both of us knowing that someday we would meet?" Alex pondered for a moment. "I don't know, my friend, but if so, then his plan worked better than he could have imagined." The two men looked at each other, a new understanding and mutual respect shining in their eyes. They knew that from that night on, nothing would be the same. They had rediscovered the true meaning of success and the responsibility that came with it. Meanwhile, in the shadows outside the restaurant, a figure silently watched. A smile of satisfaction crossed his face before disappearing into the night, his work at last complete. In the days and weeks that followed, the Golden Gate transformed. The changes promised by Ethan were quickly implemented, and soon the restaurant became a model to follow in the industry. Sarah, with the support of her bosses, began studying business administration with the promise of a managerial position in her future. Alex, for his part, brought the lessons learned that night to all his companies. He implemented support programs for employees, increased salaries and benefits, and created growth opportunities for those who demonstrated potential and dedication. The story of what happened at the Golden Gate that night became an urban legend, whispered in corporate hallways and restaurant kitchens. It inspired other entrepreneurs to reconsider their practices and see their employees not as resources, but as human beings with dreams and aspirations. But perhaps the most significant change occurred in the hearts of Alex and Ethan. Their friendship, forged in business, deepened and became a true brotherhood. Together, they created a foundation dedicated to helping young entrepreneurs, continuing the legacy of their mysterious benefactor. And although they never discovered the identity of the man who had changed their lives so many years ago, they knew that somehow they were fulfilling his vision. Every life they touched, every dream they helped make a reality was a tribute to that act of kindness that had set them on this path. Thus, what began as a simple social experiment became the catalyst for a much greater change. A reminder that sometimes the most valuable lessons come from the most unexpected places, and that true success is not measured in dollars and cents, but in the lives we touch and improve along the way. And as New York slept, two friends raised their glasses at the Golden Gate, toasting to the future, to second chances and to the transformative power of compassion and empathy. Because in the end, they discovered that true wealth was not in their bank accounts, but in the hearts of the people around them.